I believe that there are generally two approaches to smartphone innovation: innovating without customer feedback and innovating with customer feedback. On one hand, you've got a lot of creative freedom because you're basically starting with a blank canvas, so you could end up with something quite magical. But you're also opening yourself up to a lot of risk because when you venture into the unknown, there is no real way of knowing if what you end up with is something people might actually use. But on the other hand, you're putting together things that people have asked for. You're building a phone that the people want. So you're putting a whole bunch of things that you know will work into a smartphone that eventually works. Something practical. But what if you could combine the two? What would a smartphone like that look like? Well, if I had to hazard a guess, I'd say that it looks a lot like the Xiaomi Mi Mix 3. Well, with an opening like that, I guess the best place to start this review is with the Mi Mix 3's show-stopping feature. The slide. Why is this necessary, you ask? Let me explain. 2016's Xiaomi Mi Mix was really the first smartphone to popularize the idea of the ultra-slim bezel. It was marketed as a concept, but the resulting device was one you could buy, and it was also one that was far more polished than a concept should have been. But with next to no bezels on the front of the display, where do you put the selfie cameras? Well, Xiaomi decided to slap them at the bottom chin, but if you ask me, that didn't really work. And after 2 generations of trying, they pivoted, and what you end up with is the Xiaomi Mi Mix 3. In retrospect, this old-school approach to the very new world problem of too little bezel real estate should have been more obvious, but I guess that's the benefit of hindsight. Nevertheless, it's hard to argue with the results because Xiaomi's done a phenomenal job. The magnetic sliding mechanism is what I'd describe as crisp and satisfying. With just a flick of your thumb, the display in front effortlessly clicks into place a couple of centimeters lower, revealing the 24-megapixel selfie shooter up front. It's such a well-oiled mechanism, but it also does so without feeling flimsy. In fact, it's so robust that I definitely believe Xiaomi's quoted lifespan of 300,000 slides. And it's not just a fun gimmick either. You can customize it to launch specific apps with the selfie camera being the default, and even gain access to a set of tools with a single slide down. You can also do the really retro slide down to answer your calls if the need arises. This slider is not quite as elaborate as something like the Oppo Find X, though it is hard to deny how something as simple as this can bring a spark of joy to the 8-year-old inside me. The feeling is almost magical, and that's hard to find in a world full of glass and metal slabs. That said, this whole sliding mechanism isn't without its issues. Dust buildup in the crevices was one of the biggest problems I faced, and if the phone has been in your pocket for a while, things can get quite gnarly. There was also one day where a grain of sand or something similar got trapped between the display and the chassis, and it would produce this awful scratching whenever I slid the phone up or down. I couldn't get it out because the gap was so small, so all I could do was endure. It eventually fell off my device and I didn't notice any visible damage, so I'd count myself pretty lucky. But dust aside, this whole magnetic slider also brings a whole host of limitations for the Mi Mix 3 as a smartphone. For example, you can't have any kind of IP67 or IP68 water resistance. You also can't get a good pair of front-facing stereo speakers, so you're left with the weak single bottom firing speaker that just sounds sad compared to the other high-end flagships. Then there's the issue of space, because apparently there wasn't much left in the chassis for a large battery. Instead, the Mi Mix 3 gets stuck with a 3200 mAh cell, but I will say that the battery life from that cell was better than I expected. With moderate usage, that means a lot of Netflix and YouTube with a smattering of camera and GPS, I got about 5 hours of screen on time with a little over 18 hours on battery. That puts this smartphone at just about average, which isn't bad, but can you imagine how much better it would have been with a 4000 mAh cell? The silver lining here is that it supports fast charging and fast wireless charging, and it even includes a wireless charger in the box. But is that enough to make up for raw battery longevity? I don't think so. Oh, and since we're on the topic of things that are just okay, let's talk about the camera. So the Mi Mix 3 has a dual camera setup that's pretty much identical to the one on the Mi Mix 2S. Two 12 megapixel sensors, one with a telephoto lens and the other with a wide-angled lens. And they perform reasonably well. I'm not saying they're bad, I'm just saying that I don't think they're as good as the top dogs like the iPhone XS or the Galaxy Note 9. In fact, I ran a quick blind test in the office and the Note 9 won with an overwhelming majority. That said, what I find attractive in a photo may vary from what you find attractive in a photo, so don't take my word for it. Decide for yourself with the sample photos I've linked in the video description. So, in case you haven't picked up on it yet, the Mi Mix 3 isn't a perfect smartphone by any means. It has a very clear set of flaws, and these are things you either don't care for or can't live with. But if you could look past these limitations, I think the Xiaomi Mi Mix 3 is one of the best smartphones Xiaomi has ever made. For starters, it is a flagship powerhouse through and through. Yes, the Snapdragon 845 chip at its core isn't quite as 2019 as some of you might like, but it's definitely no slouch. Paired with the 6 gigs of RAM on my unit, it absolutely flies through regular smartphone tasks. Though I do believe that a big part of that is also because of how well optimized the MIUI 10 Android skin is. I'm personally a stock Android fan and I don't really like the way MIUI looks, but it's hard to argue with how well it performs. I didn't encounter any performance issues with the device, nor did I run into any major bugs, which is great news. Xiaomi's also built in a dedicated button that's set to launch your AI assistant by default, kind of like the Bixby button on Samsung's flagships. But the perk here is that Xiaomi actually allows you to customize what it does. You can have it launch specific apps with either a double tap or a long press, which is something I wish I could do with Samsung's Bixby button. And then there's the downright phenomenal body and build quality. I think the Mi Mix 3 is a drop-dead gorgeous device that's beautifully engineered with clean lines and great material choices. Let me just put it this way, the Mi Mix 3 is a phone where the entire screen slides down, yet it's so well put together that you can't even feel the seam where the display and the chassis separate. It's astounding. Then there's the heft. I love a phone that has a good weight to it. Not too light, but not too heavy either, and the Mi Mix 3 nails this balance. In true Mix fashion, the Mi Mix 3 also comes with a ceramic back. Besides looking exquisite, this back is also surprisingly resistant to scratches. But I think the most phenomenal part about this smartphone is its screen. It is truly unreal how immersive the viewing experience is on this phone. The panel itself is a 6.39-inch AMOLED screen that pushes a resolution of Full HD+, and I think it looks great. It's sharp, vibrant, and has great viewing angles for an OLED. But it's the sheer lack of bezels that hits you the hardest. This device has a borderline insane screen-to-body ratio of 93.4%, second only to the Oppo Find X. Watching content on this thing is ridiculous, but it's also an adjustment because this panel is incredibly tall. It has an aspect ratio of 19.5 by 9, which makes it the tallest display I've used on an Android device so far. But the upside is, it keeps the device's footprint small, so it's very manageable for its size. The Mix 3 has all the hallmarks of an expensive device. It feels solid yet fragile, and it's so well put together that I just can't help but be impressed. My biggest complaint with the original Mi Mix and the subsequent Mi Mix 2 was that I was forced to choose between having a really cool smartphone that made me feel special and a really practical one that I could use every day. And that sucked because I wanted both. But in a way, I kind of found that with the Mi Mix 3. Yes, it's not quite as practical as your typical high-end flagship smartphone, and I don't think it can really compete toe-to-toe in every one of those flagship categories. But the beauty of it is that the Mi Mix 3 doesn't have to, because it has something none of those flagships do. It has this special secret sauce feature that's equal parts cool and impractical, but also entirely awesome. Which means that it's sort of in a league of its own, in the same way that the original Mix was, and I really love that about the Mix 3. But I think the best part about the Mix 3 is that you can have all of this for a price that's way lower than most other flagships. At launch, the recommended retail price for the 128GB model is 2,199 ringgit. That's a ridiculous price for a flagship phone with these specs, much less one with such a unique feature. It is a bit of a douche move for Xiaomi to charge 100 ringgit extra for the sapphire blue and jade green color variants because they're fundamentally the same phone. But even then, it is still more than a reasonable asking price for a phone like this. And that is it for this review. Let me know what you think of the Xiaomi Mi Mix 3 in the comments below. But before I end the video, I'd like to give a shout out to all of you guys who gave me constructive feedback on my previous hands-on video, especially you guys. I hope this video answers all that questions, and I hope you like this one a little more. Because if you did, be sure to give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to like us on Facebook, subscribe to our YouTube channel, click on the notification bell icon so that you don't miss any of our future uploads. In the meantime, you can also check out my full review, which is a lot more detailed and it has a whole bunch of stuff like camera samples, which will be linked in the description box. But if you're looking for something else to watch, you can check out our latest video over here, or you can also check out our latest new series where we bring you the latest tech news in case you missed it. And that's it for me. Thank you so much. I'm Rory and I will catch you in the next video. Have a nice day, guys. Bye!